Hello and welcome to another episode of We Don't Talk About Uno, the podcast where we talk about Disney Lorcana's trading card game. My name's Simeon and I'm here with the beautiful co-host, the Maximus to my Pascal. It's David.
Hello.
How are we doing?
I'm okay. I'm really excited about today's episode because we're trying something different. We're not going into current things about Lorcana. We're looking at kind of evergreen tips of how to play from a casual perspective. So we're casual trading card game players. We love playing casually. And we want to share what makes us enjoy the game, what makes the game fun for us to play, and what part of what makes it fun is being better at the game and getting good at it, and what makes a good deck. So it's kind of maybe that's a bit of a weird mix, but I feel like I have more fun when my decks work. So that's part of what I...
Yeah. I think a lot of casual players are like this, that I'm not looking to win worlds. However, I'm having a better time when I'm drawing lots of cards, I'm playing lots of cards, and I feel like I'm playing them efficiently and in a way that is benefiting the game plan. Great. Usually, at the start of each episode, I'd have a little rundown of today we're doing this and this and this, but we've got a lot of tips to get through. So let's get to it.
Let's get straight in. So, yeah, we've got 10 tips, and we've got top 5 each.
Yep.
So my number one is around how you put together your deck. So one of the exciting things for me about trading card games, and what occupies a lot of my time around trading card games, is putting decks together. In some ways, it took me a while to realise this, but in some ways, it's where I started. It's like when you're building a deck, what's your entry point to that deck? How do you start building a deck? Where do you go to look at it? And for me, it's about finding something that I like, that catches my attention, that I care about. So one of the decks that I haven't actually built with cards yet, because I don't have all the cards, but when the cards were spoiled, I first built was a Peter Pan deck. Mm-hmm. And the reason I built that is, one, because I like the movie Peter Pan, but really, really like the card, Tinkerbell Tiny Tactician. So it's a Dreamborn version of Tinkerbell.
Yeah.
And so I was like, yeah, because of that card, I want to build a Peter Pan deck. So that's a steel emerald Peter Pan deck that I've put together. Another example is, regular listeners will know that I've got this thing about Mickey Mouse Wayward Sorcerer. I didn't realise I had a thing about Mickey Mouse the Sorcerer until we started podcasting about Lorcana, but it's become more and more of a thing. You brought me a pin of it. I made a mistake saying the card had been spoiled before it was spoiled.
But then it was spoiled anyway, so it was fine.
It was all fine. And so that's my current... So I've got an amethyst emerald deck that's kind of based around that. That's my star card.
Yeah.
And that was my route into it. So find something that you care about that grabs your attention. It could be a card, it could be an idea that you have about how a deck might work. So you might think, I really like items in Lorcana, so I'd like to build an items deck or something like that. You just have an idea, something you care about, and that's where to start. But then the second point, so this comes with a caveat, which is what I learned quite quickly. So the first time I built a deck in Magic the Gathering, I built a fairy tale deck. And so I just looked for all the fairy tale cards and put them together. And it didn't work. So find something you like and build around that, but also make sure the deck works. It does something.
What do you mean by that? What do you mean the deck works?
Well, I think we'll cover that in the rest of the podcast, like different things that make a deck work. So I don't want to go into all the tips right now. But yeah, keep listening and we'll talk about some of the things that make a deck function well and that make it fun to play, and that it does something and doesn't just leave you feeling frustrated because everyone else at the table is getting ahead on the law and you're not really doing anything.
But we mean it's somewhat efficient. It's not necessarily going to be the most competitive deck, but it somewhat does something that you want it to do.
Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah, I think the when I first started playing Magic, somebody said to me, build a deck that you really like, not necessarily the best deck, because if you build a deck that you like, then you'll have a great time every time you play. Whereas if you build a deck that you don't really like but is super competitive, you'll only have fun when you're winning. So yeah, my way of ensuring that I'm always having a great time is playing a deck that I will enjoy playing if I'm winning, and I will enjoy playing it if I'm not winning at all.
Yeah. And one of the things we talk about when we play trading card games is alternative win conditions.
Yes.
And that doesn't necessarily mean you've won the game. I mean, some trading card games do have literal alternative win conditions, but it's like does my deck do its thing? So Mickey Mouse Wayward Sorcerer really likes putting out brooms and taking them back to your hand.
Yeah.
And so if
yeah.
my deck's done that in a game, if it's cycled the brooms around, I feel happy. That's my alternative win con. So whether or not I win and get to 20 lore first, my deck's won because it's done its thing.
Yeah.
What's your first tip, Simeon?
Okay, my first tip is not from me.
Oh.
It's from the child.
Oh, let's go into it.
Oh, look who it is. It's the child.
Hello.
Hello, how are you doing today?
Good.
Amazing. Okay, so this whole episode is about our top tips.
Nice.
And you told me a top tip. In fact, my top tip is one of my top tips I learned from you.
Yeah.
So I wanted you to explain it in your own words because that's how I learnt it. And it's something that you told me after our first Lorcana tournament.
Yeah, it's I didn't challenge as much as I just kept getting lore, but then when they had like gonna get loads and loads of lore, I would challenge to make them not.
Yeah, well, you told me that you came out of it and you said, well, I hardly needed to challenge. I didn't need to challenge hardly at all.
Yeah.
And that is really good because it evidences that you've understood the whole point of the game. What's the point of the game?
Get lore.
Get lore. Yeah. Is the point of the game getting rid of your opponent's characters?
No.
I mean, that might help you, but that's not the point of the game. Brilliant. Well, thanks for that top tip. We'll get David's take on it now, okay?
Bye.
So what do you think, David? Do you think that people need to focus a little bit more on the actual way to win the game?
It depends on where they're at, I guess, but I think it's important to remember. It's something that's very easy for me to forget when I'm building a deck. It's just like, oh, I like this character, I like this character, I like this character. And I think that's probably one of the deficits of my current Amethyst Emerald deck.
Yeah.
Is that it doesn't do much lore generation. It's kind of focused on disrupting other players, which can work really well. But,
Yeah. No, I get that.
It doesn't make for a quick race. It's about sorting out what other people are doing, mess up what they're trying to do, and then maybe get to 20 lore in the end.
And I do think that that's a valid strategy. I think
Yeah.
one of the most powerful decks we're seeing in the meta at the moment is that Ruby Amethyst deck that is looking at controlling the board state.
Very disruptive, yeah.
But especially for new players or players coming in from other trading card games, which is all about controlling or rather, disrupting other people's characters or other people's cards. It's important to remember that this is a race. And I've seen so many people make suboptimal plays, plays where you're just going, but that makes no sense. Why are you removing that character that hardly makes any lore with your character that makes tons of lore? Or even just players often will be like, oh, but I don't want to, especially brand new players. If you're a new player and you've only played a couple of times already, you might have had this thing where you're like, but I don't want to exert my character to quest, because if I quest, they can challenge my character and then my character goes away. It's like, yeah, but you're playing a character to turn it sideways, to generate lore, to win the game. So that's kind of where I wanted to go with this.
Yeah, I think that's an important point.
Yeah.
It's kind of the Aesop's fable thing, though. It's like the hare and the tortoise, isn't it? Like, do you want to get there really fast, or do you want to be a bit slower and maybe disrupt the other players, but get there slow and steady? Because I think what you're saying is really valid about you want to exert them, but there are some cards that maybe you don't want to exert because they're doing something powerful and you don't want to lose them.
Yeah. And I'm not saying this as a you should always race. That's definitely not what I'm saying. I'm just saying, remember how you win the game. When you're building a deck, put things in there that generate lore.
I think every deck wants a card or 4 copies of a card that has 3 lore, at the very minimum.
Yeah, definitely.
But probably more than that. But yeah.
And have a plan. Have that kind of focus on, okay, here's how we're going to win the game. That's kind of my first. I've got some quite complex tips coming up, but my first one was just like,
remember how to win.
Remember the rules of the game.
Get to 20 lore.
Great. What's your second tip?
My second tip. Well, I just mentioned I did a segue because I mentioned having four of a card in a deck, which is the maximum number of cards you can have in a deck.
Okay.
And if you want your deck to work well, you want it to be consistent. And in some ways it's an obvious tip, but in some ways it's really easy to miss, that a deck is going to more consistently do what you want it to do if you just choose 15 cards and have 4 copies of each of those cards, compared to if you have 60 different cards.
Yes.
Or 30 different cards. And that's especially significant if you're trying to look for what in Lorcana is called a combo or a synergy, when you 2 cards go together. So there's like a really simple example is there's a Amethyst Tinkerbell that helps Peter Pan challenge for +1. He's +1 challenger. Or Flotsam and Jetsam, they work really well together.
Yeah.
If you want to find that combination that works well together, put 4 of each of them in. You're much more likely to find it when you're searching a deck. So
there's nothing worse than having 3 copies of Flotsam in your hand and 0 Jetsons, because you only really put 1 Jetson in because, well, who knows? I don't know if I like that card or not. If you're going for a synergy, you need to make sure that synergy is, you're going to be able to find that synergy. Yeah,
and then this point comes with a caveat though, and that is for casual play. So some cards, if you buy them individually, are costing $20, $30, $40. That's some of the best cards. Don't be worried in casual play if you've only got one of those cards that you opened in a booster and you'd like to put it in. Don't think, I've got to have 4 of every card or it's not going in. It can be really nice to have a splashy, big, powerful card that just shows up sometimes as a kind of deck tech almost thing that you add in. And it's fun to put those in. So don't be shy putting those in casual play, because that's a really fun thing to do as well. So I've kind of contradicted myself. Like, if you want the most consistent deck, have 4 of every card. But don't be shy of throwing in things that are just really fun or just have really powerful effects just because you've only got one of that card, because it's still really good to put that in.
Yeah, I said last episode, I'm struggling to get the amount of cardboard I would need to build all of the decks that I want to build. And at the moment, it's either going to be super expensive to do that, but also it's really hard to actually find the packs at all anyway.
Yeah.
And at that point, am I playing suboptimal decks? Yes. Is my aspiration to build more consistent decks by having 4 copies of each card that I want in there? Yes. At the moment, am I not putting in a card because I've only got one of them? No, I'm putting that card in that I want to play.
Yeah, but there's some really good cards, like there's Pongo. I think Pongo is a common or an uncommon.
Yeah.
Really cheap to buy, but a really good Ruby card.
Definitely.
Put 4 Pongos in. There's no question about that.
Yeah. On that deck building thing, while we're talking about it early, I've got to have a look, Google. Have you seen Lorcana?
I like the title. So that's like, so in other trading card games, there might be a pauper version where you use cheap. The common cards are they're called common cards because they're common to find in booster packs, so that means they're cheaper to buy if you buy the singles. So,
there's a GameStop shop in the States. They've come up with their rules are only commons and uncommons, so you can play commons and uncommons. So you can, there's enough cards to start building decks.
And there's some really powerful uncommons. Yeah. Mad Hatter is like, whoa.
Oh yeah, it's
absolutely
incredible.
Mad.
Yeah. But also they've kind of looked at how we're playing currently and gone, there are a couple of decks that try and go through the whole deck, but most games we're only looking at the top 20 or 30 cards of our decks.
Yeah.
So they've limited deck sizes to 50, which also helps with the budget. And I love that kind of, if you're playing with friends, just come up with your own rules if you've got limitations.
What's your second tip, Simeon?
Okay, so my second tip is the concept of an ink curve, and people might go, "What? Ink doesn't curve?"
It does if you draw it in a particular line.
Oh, if you draw it in a... Oh, yeah, I see. I thought you meant like... I was thinking liquid ink. Anyway, so there is a concept in most trading card games that have a cost associated to playing the cards, which in Lorcana is ink, which is that you want to have the right amount of cards in your deck and in your opening hand to be able to play something consistently on turn 1, turn 2, turn 3, etc., etc. Now, this is called a curve because generally, if you were to look at the number of one cost cards,
So on turn 1, you want to play a 1 cost card.
On
turn 2, you want to play a 2
it's
cost.
called a curve because you usually want fewer 1 cost, a little bit more 2 cost, a little bit more 3 and 4 cost, and then you probably want fewer like 7 and 8 cost cards. That's why it's called curve. Just to explain the terminology to people who might not have heard it before. Now, this seems super daunting to people, and you might have looked or you might have seen, I'm going to build a great Lorcana deck, I'm going to go and read some strategy articles, and you've gone and you've looked at people talking about the ink curve, and you've gone, how the hell am I supposed to work out how many 1 ink cards, how many 2 ink cards, and how many 8 ink cards I'm supposed to put in my deck? You might understand the concept of you don't want a deck full of 1 and 2 cost, and you don't want, because then once past turn 4 or 5, you're not doing a lot. And then you might also understand the concept of you've got to do something on the early turns of the game, so it's better to have some 1 and 2 cost cards in. But finding that curve, or what to put in at each stage of the game, can be really daunting. The way that I like to do it is to just think about what I want to be playing each turn. So in my ideal game, when I'm just having fun, playing some cards, what do I want to play at each turn of the game? So on turn 1, what's my ideal card? So let's say I've been playing an awful lot of Sapphire, so I'm just going to use Sapphire as an example. On turn 1, I want to play a card and ink that card. Doesn't matter what it is, but I want to ink a card, and then I want to play Develop Your Brain, one of the most powerful cards that you can play on turn 1. Great. I then, turn 2, want to play Grammatala, a 2-cost character that will help me ramp and gain more ink in the future. Turn 3, I then really want to play Mickey Mouse Detective. So I've got to ink a card so I can play a 3-cost card. That will get me an extra ink. So on turn 4, I can actually ink a card. I can skip my 4 drop card. I can go straight to playing a 5-drop Maleficent. And that's the first 4 turns of the game mapped out in my head.
I think you might have just done that in a recent multiplayer game.
That is what that's my goal.
You also did a thing where you used Grandma Talent to sing 1 step ahead. I thought that was pretty fun.
yeah, that's a good little synergy there. But by thinking of it in that way, by thinking, what do I want to play on turn 1? This is the best thing I could be doing on turn 1. What do I want to be doing on turn 2? This is what I want to be doing on turn 2.
Yeah.
Then that will help you look at those things, look at the cards, and then you can kind of work out from there, okay, this is how many cards I need. So I want 4 copies of Develop Your Brain, so I can definitely play those on turn 1.
Yeah.
Maybe I want another 1 or 2
choices
for 1 drops,
Yeah.
because I'm not guaranteed to draw those to open in my opening hand.
Yeah, because you've got to have 60 cards in your deck. So
You've got to have at least 60 cards, so I'm not guaranteed to do that. But if I were to have, let's say in my current deck, I've got Scepter of Arundel, 4 copies of Scepter of Arundel, and 4 copies of Develop Your Brain. At that point, I'm pretty sure that in my opening hand, it's more likely than not that I will have a 1-drop to play on turn 1. And then you can work along the whole scale, the ink scale, and you can see where you want to prioritize cards. In Sapphire, for example, I'm really going to try and ramp out some cards. I'm going to try and get ahead on ink. So there's lots of things that will give me extra ink. So I'm not really playing a lot of 4-drops unless they're super powerful, because I'm hoping to play a 5-drop on turn 4. So that's just an example. The ink curve can be super daunting, but if you work it out that way, what do I want to be playing each turn, and work it out the likelihood of drawing those cards on each turn, that's a much less threatening way to think about building a deck.
And I know you're going to talk about opening hands more later, but it also helps you look at your opening hand and see, do I have a 1? Do I have a 2? Do I have a 3?
Yeah.
And if not, then maybe I want to see if I could get that, because that would be helpful.
And do I have ink to play those?
Do I have inkable cards?
Do I have inkable cards
Yeah.
to make sure I can play those things on turn 1, 2, 3?
Yeah.
I will say just... I'll talk about mulligans in a little bit, which is, the bit where you discard or put cards on the bottom of your deck and draw new cards at the start of the game.
Yep.
But my little rule of thumb, the thing I use as a little tool is I think about looking at the first 10 cards, because a lot of the times I'll be drawing 7 cards and then maybe putting 3 of those on the bottom of my deck and drawing another 3 if I need to. So in my first turn, I'm thinking I will be able to look at 10 cards before my first turn.
Yeah. Yeah. Nice.
That's the ink curve.
So, thanks, Simeon. My third tip is about one of the real pinch points in Lorcana. So in Lorcana, most turns you want to be playing probably at least 2 cards. And by that I mean you want to ink something.
Yeah.
And then you want to use the ink, you have to play something. So there's 2 cards coming out of your hand onto the table. But at the start of your turn, you only draw 1 card from the top of the deck. So with that in mind, you're probably quite quickly going to run out of cards. And that actually happens to a lot of people. There's a lot of discussions online of how to deal with that. Some people like to change the rules of the game to help deal with that. If that's what you do in casual play, that's up to you. I wouldn't recommend that myself. I think it breaks the game if you change the rules that much. Rather than doing that, I would say make sure in your deck you've got cards that help you get more than 1 card into your hand every turn.
Yeah.
Because that will help you solve that issue. So put card draw into your decks because that will make your game more fun because it means on your turn you can do those 2 things.
Yep.
And it also gives you more choices about what you ink and what you play. So the more cards in your hand, the more choices you have, the more strategies you can pursue, the more responsive you can be to what other people are doing because you've got more choices. I would say that in Lorcana there's not a huge amount of card draw yet, but there's enough that people can be putting in their decks. And that's every colour but ruby. So I've not found a good one for ruby. But
Yeah, no, you're right. Yeah.
In steel, there's a lot of ones that help you draw and discard. But then there's a whole new world that fills up your hand to 7 cards in steel. There's also Beast Mirror that gives you stuff when you run out of cards. There's quite a lot of choices in Amethyst, in the yellow colour. That includes Stitch Rockstar, that draws cards when you play low-cost cards.
Uh-huh.
And Rapunzel that heals cards but then draws stuff because you've healed them. Probably the easiest colour, and it's easiest because the card draw, they're common cards, they're easy to get hold of. I just said that yellow's amethyst, isn't it? Purple's amethyst. What's yellow? Amber.
Yellow's
Sorry.
amber. I didn't want to correct you because your flow was so beautiful.
My flow was beautiful. Sorry, I was talking about amber when I was talking about
Yeah, Stitch is
Two-
amber.
Two
Rapunzel's.
colours that begin with AM. My apologies. Yeah, if you're struggling with card draw, go to Amethyst because you can get friends on the other side. That's a common. It's really easy to get hold of. Really cheap to buy if you buy it as a single. Put 4 of those in your deck. That draws you 2 cards when you play it. Put the 3-cost Maleficent, who's also a common.
Yep.
That draws you a card when you play Maleficent. You've got a character out. You get a card into your hand. Amethyst is a great one for fixing the card draw issue in the state of the game that it currently is, where there's not a lot of common cards to give.
You know what? That purple Maleficent has been so good for me. The amount of times that I've been kind of totally empty-handed, and just drawn it off the top.
Yeah.
I get to. I say empty-handed. I'm empty-handed because it's late game. I draw it off the top. I play it. I draw another card, and I can play that one as well.
You can play it or ink it, or you've got choices.
So good.
Yeah, it's a really good card. In Sapphire, there's some good choices as well. Morris is probably the classic one that when you play an item, you draw a card. It's not a great deck yet, but I think it'll be really good in the future. And then in Emerald, one of my favourite cards, and I hadn't really clocked this card until I played it, and then I was like, this is a really fun card, is Mad Hatter. So when Mad Hatter gets challenged, you draw a card. And people really want to challenge Mad Hatter because he exerts for 3 law. So he's a card that needs to be dealt with.
That's such a great card.
Yeah, but if you're challenging Mad Hatter, just bear in mind, you're giving your opponent something really valuable. That's something important to bear in mind as well.
Yeah, and so many of the Emerald cards are like that. It's one of those, this is bad for you if you do, and bad for you if you don't. Okay.
So that's my third tip. Make sure you draw lots of cards because it'll make the game more fun to play. What's your third tip, Simeon?
That is a great tip. Okay, my third tip, we're going to get a little bit out there at the moment. My third tip is beware of cognitive biases, and that's the simplest way I can explain it. Okay, I'll give you an example of a cognitive bias.
Can you explain it like I'm 5?
Can I explain it like you're 5?
Yeah, maybe an example will help. Yeah.
Sometimes our brain tricks us, and we're doing something that we are doing because it feels good to do emotionally.
Feels sensible, yeah.
But it's not the best way to win the game.
Okay.
Or we stop doing something because it feels bad, but it actually is the best thing to do.
Okay.
I'll give you an example. Having 17 ink in your inkwell feels amazing. chances are you probably haven't got enough cards in your hand because you inked all of them.
So there's nothing to spend your ink on.
Ain't got anything to spend your ink on because it's there. I mean, there are tactics that might want that. I don't want to go into the ins and outs of that. Okay, there's loads of things that I have little reminders to myself about in games where I go, oh, hang on, just because that feels good, is that helping me win the game? Like, oh, there's a really annoying character on the other side of the board. I'm going to remove it. Is that helping me win the game? It will feel great to remove it, but is that helping me win the game? And sometimes we have these cognitive biases, and there's loads of different cognitive biases we can have. There's loads of different things where our brain tricks us into thinking that one thing is the best path, but it's not. A different path of action would actually be better. At the moment, there's this big question in online Lorcana discussion around how many uninkable cards should you have in your deck? And a lot of people are saying, oh, take them all out. You should run 4 or 8 maximum.
Yeah.
Because probably what they've done is they've played a game of Lorcana where they're stuck with a load of uninkable cards in their hand.
It's happened to me, yeah.
And it feels horrible.
Fun. It is.
It feels horrible.
It is horrible.
But you know what? Some of those uninkable cards are the most powerful cards in the game.
Well, that's why they've made them uninkable.
That's why they've made them uninkable.
Most removal is uninkable.
Exactly. A lot of interactions, uninkable. A lot of shift characters that you can play for cheaper, like Aladdin, Dr. Facilier, uninkable. And they've made it so that it works that way. So you're really missing out on some excellent cards if you don't include those in your deck. But it's a cognitive bias. People have, it's happened again. I've run out of inkable cards. I can't ink enough cards. And I hate having these cards in my deck. It feels bad.
It does. So you should limit the number.
You should definitely limit the number.
You need ink, yeah.
That is a problem.
Yeah.
However, there is definitely a number, and it's definitely larger than 4. At the moment, I'm looking myself. People will want me to say a number. And I am currently running either 12 or 16 in my deck, uninkable cards. There is a great way of finding out what the right thing for you is if you like doing a little bit of maths and a little bit of digging. There's an incredible Magic the Gathering player called Frank Carson who did all of the maths for us on how many resource cards you could play in a Magic deck. Now, if you play Magic, you'll be able to transfer that knowledge straight over. If you don't play Magic, you don't have to learn the rules of Magic to understand this. There are some online tools. They're called hypergeometric calculators. So if you search Magic the Gathering hypergeometric calculator, it asks you how many cards do you want to be searching for in your deck and how many cards have you drawn, and it will tell you the likelihood that those cards will come up. So I will put in 12 uninkable cards, and what's the likelihood that I will have 4 of them in my hand by turn X to make sure that I can't ink. So you can have a look at that, and you can have a look at, here's how many I would be happy with playing. My current thing is 12 or 16.
It will still happen sometimes that you get 4 in your hand. It just
does.
And it feels bad, but yeah, I think 12 or 16, you're not going to face that issue a lot with that level.
Yeah, but you're not optimizing by having that, this felt bad, therefore I'm making a decision. We should make games-based decisions. No, sorry, I was going to say we should make games-based decisions based on facts, not feelings.
Yeah.
But you know what? If you're playing casually, sometimes, do the play that feels good,
Follow
but you know isn't optimal.
Biases,
But if you want to optimize your plays, make sure you're really beware of cognitive biases. What's your fourth tip,
Simeon.
David?
It's quite a quick one, and it deals with an issue that I mentioned earlier, that people run out of cards in their hands, and that it seems to be a common discussion point online of, why do I run out of cards in my hand? What can I do about it? Or here's my solution, which is to change the rules of the game. Card draw is an important way of dealing with that, but the other one is to manage your resources. Like, it can seem like the obvious choice can seem like, okay, I've got to play 2 cards every turn. I've got to put something in my ink well.
Yep.
I've got to then play something. You don't always have to you don't have to do either of them, but you definitely don't always have to put something in your inkwell.
Yeah.
Especially once you're up to about, I would say, 5 ink. It depends on the top end of your deck and what the highest. I mean, if you've got a 9 cost card, maybe you want to be going higher. But
yes.
if you know that most of your high-end cards are 6 or 5 to 6, you don't need to be inking things until you've got that 6 in your hand and you know you want to play it, and then you can get your 6th ink out. So that's a way to give yourself more choices through the game, is to stop at about 5 or 6 ink and don't keep playing ink. Unless that's part of your... It could be part of your strategy to keep playing more, but you don't have to.
The other thing I would say is that there's two things. If you've got a lot of high-cost cards, and I think people think, oh, that's the obvious thing. The other thing is if you've got an awful lot of card draw. So if you're playing Amethyst and you're playing an awful lot of card draw in your deck, you might want to carry on inking.
Or if you're playing Amber and you've got Rockstar Stitch. Or,
if you've got a way of really refilling your hand. Because then, having 12 ink and playing 3 characters that turn could be a thing that your deck's doing. But I think often people will ink based on the highest cost card in their deck, when a lot of decks, if you're drawing a lot of cards, you might be playing 2 or 3 or 4 cards each turn.
If you've got a lot of high cost cards in your deck, you want to be ramping a lot in any case. You want to be using cards like Detective Mickey, like Grandma Tala, like one step ahead, one jump ahead, to get more ink out that isn't costing you cards.
That's right, yeah.
Those cards are forms of card advantage. That's why I didn't say in the card draw thing. I mean, maybe that's a bit of a complex tip, but they are giving you ink without taking cards out of your hands. So it's a different way of giving you card advantage, which I think we'll do another episode on card advantage because I find it really interesting.
Yeah. No, we'll definitely need to do that at some point. Okay, my 4th tip is, you might have heard some trading card game players say, play to your outs. And I heard that for years. I didn't know what it meant. And I didn't want to ask because...
What does it mean, Simeon?
Well, let me tell you. There's 2 ways of looking at it. I'll explain the short version, simple version first, and then I'll explain a slightly longer version. I say slightly longer. It's not really that long at all. Basically, it means decide on your strategy and what your best chances of winning are, and pursue that. Don't get distracted with other things. Don't change your mind halfway through. Don't play half a game trying to race and then go, oh no, actually they're getting ahead, I better start controlling. Is to decide what the best chance of winning is and pursue that. So to do a very simple analogy, I think a lot of us will have played with the pre-constructed starter decks already. If you are playing the Steel Sapphire pre-constructed deck, you are racing. And stopping racing halfway through to go, oh, but they've got that character out, that's worrying me. Unless they're going to win the next turn, you might not want to challenge them. You might just want to keep racing because that deck is built to race. The slightly more complex thing is to, if there's a danger that you lose, is to do the thing that will make sure that you don't lose. So you might look at a board state and go, oh, the only chance I've got here is a board wipe. The only chance I've got is the banish all characters card. And I know I've only got one of those in my deck. What's the likelihood of me drawing it? I don't know. But if there is a chance you can draw it, then you tap that Tinkerbell to draw a card and discard a card just to see whether you can. Because there's no extra points for almost winning. You might feel good if you're, again, playing casually. But always play with that in mind. What's the best chance I have of winning? What's the best chance I have of not losing next go? Is there anything in my deck that could bring me back? What's the strategy that I've prepared for? And really play with that plan in mind. And there are times when you should probably deviate that from that, and there will be times when you go, oh, my plan was going to be this, but I can see I can actually do that. Okay. But more often than not, you will be playing a deck that follows a plan.
This is quite interesting. So when you're building a deck or when you buy a pre-constructed deck, how do you work out what that deck's plan is? Because and that's a genuine question for me. Like, I just built an Amethyst Emerald deck that I've talked a lot about this episode. And at the minute, I don't know how it wins. Okay, I mean, it does win sometimes, and so I kind of know how it wins. But my plan at the minute is to, because it's Amethyst, draw lots of cards, try and find Wayward Sorcerer Mickey Mouse, because I know that's a really powerful card.
Yeah.
Try and find some brooms, and then wreak havoc with that. Okay. Is that the kind of thing that you mean?
Yeah, so I'll give you two tips. Firstly, if you buy a starter deck, all of the instructions look the same, but they're not. They all have a little paragraph of text in saying what this deck is looking to do.
Okay, that's
So,
cool.
so for the starter decks, read that.
Yeah.
That's a great tip. For if you're building it yourself, and you've just done that, I would say that the tip I gave before about working what you want to do on each turn is really important.
Okay.
So with Mickey Mouse Wayward Sorcerer, on turn 1, if at all possible, you want to be drawing cards, or you want to be playing a character down, present some kind of board, do something on turn 1.
Yeah.
On turn 2, ideally, if you've got a broom, play the broom.
Even if I don't yet have Mickey in my hand.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, yeah.
Because and then your strategy is draw as many cards as you can to find Mickey.
Yeah.
The Mickey Wayward Sorcerer broom combo only works when you have Mickeys and brooms.
So I would say my turn 2 play is, if I've got a broom in my hand and I've got another turn 2 play in my hand, which is this one, I would choose Uzma over the broom, because Uzma would help me dig for Mickey.
Dig for the Mickey. Yeah, that's great. The other thing is when you've got a small selection of cards. So there's 8 cards in that deck that matter. Everything else is support. So the 8 cards is the 4 Mickeys and the 4 brooms, because that's all we've got at the moment.
Yeah.
So everything else is support. You want to be playing the cards that bring back cards from your discard pile.
Is there that in Amethyst and Emerald?
I'm not sure.
Okay, but if that was in, I think that's an Amber thing to bring back cards from your discard.
Well, you might want to swap out the Emerald for...
But I like the Emerald.
Yeah, but I would say, if you're looking for a combo or a synergy where you've only got 8 coppers, you need one of 4 cards and then one of another 4 cards. That's really, really important. The brooms themselves obviously bring back things from your discard pile, don't they, to your hand?
You can choose, so they can either bring back things from your discard shuffle back in, or other people's discard shuffle back in.
Yeah.
And I think that's more powerful than even I realise at the minute, and it will get even more powerful as more stuff happens in the game, which we'll discuss another time.
Yeah, I'm sure there's optimised ways. All right, we're off track. We're off track.
Tip 5. It's a bit of a broad tip, a bit like your cognitive biases one, which is to just read stuff, listen to stuff if you're listening to this podcast. But if you listen to this podcast, check out other content too. See what other people are doing. Talk to your friends about what they do, why they built a deck a particular way. Yeah, have conversations and then just try things out. I know what we said can guide you a little bit, but don't be afraid to go off track and try other things as well.
Definitely. That's a really good tip. Okay, so you said read stuff and listen to stuff. What else would you recommend?
What else would I recommend?
As in what content other than this podcast? Obviously, listen to this podcast religiously. As soon as you get that ping in your app saying the new episode of We Don't Talk About Uno, you listen to that. It depends on
whichever social media you use, isn't it? There's TikTok channels, there's Facebook groups, there's YouTube channels, there's Reddit forums, there's Discord channels. There's all kinds of places you can engage. So what's your preferred social media? And then read that. 2 of my favourites. And one I know that you're not such a fan of.
Don't say that. Don't say that now. Right. One of them's going to be thinking, "Oh, damn, was it me?"
Two of my favourites. No, they're not content creators. These are channels as such. Or platforms, I should say.
Sure.
So 2 of my favourite platforms. One is Board Game Geek, because that is really, you're getting so that's for board gamers, and they have a particular perspective on trading card games, so they come at it from a slightly different angle. So the questions they have are quite interesting. The discussions they have are quite interesting. So there's a page for Lorcana on Board Game Geek, and there's a whole discussion forum on that page.
Okay, I'm happy to say that's the one I don't like. Yeah, great. Okay, carry on.
And my other one is the Reddit subreddit for Lorcana.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I don't know why, I just find that really... There's some good discussions around individual cards. It's not about... So some Facebook groups, or a lot of Facebook groups, seem to be people saying, look what I found in my local store today, or in the Walmart today. Which is fine. But I really prefer strategy discussions, and I find that they, for some reason, tend to float to the top on Reddit. So that works for me.
Brilliant.
What's your final tip, Simeon?
Well, hang on. I've got a couple of...
additions.
Couple of additions.
This point.
Yeah, no. On that point, I just wanted to give a couple of shout outs. Firstly, Dicebreaker is doing Lorcana content. It's really good. It's really
Their
professionally
content is
made.
excellent, yeah.
Their content's always excellent.
Yeah.
But also it's really slick. So if you're only going to look at like professionally produced stuff, why are you listening to this podcast? But yes,
It's professionally produced. Whether the content itself is professional, that's another matter. But the production is of the highest standard.
brilliant.
And the other shout out.
And the other shout out is Lorcana Academy on YouTube. It's some Magic the Gathering content creators that have clubbed together to do a Lorcana channel. Zbex is in there. Veggie Wagon, who is hilarious, is in there. Some really good content coming out of that. It's also really feel good. Like, I just love that. I watch that, and afterwards I'm happy. It's all super positive. And I know that's not everybody's vibe. Some people want, like, want it a bit straighter or want proper serious strategy conversations.
Yeah.
But hey, I'm playing children's card games. So I'm just enjoying it. It's fine.
It's not a children's card. It is a children's card game, but it's mainly played by people who are middle-aged.
Yeah, it probably is. Yeah. Okay. My final tip, I already alluded to it earlier, is mulligans. If people don't know what mulligans are, it's just the name that people have given the bit of the game where you draw a hand and you decide, somehow, I'm going to change this hand in some way. In Lorcana, the rule is you draw 7 cards. You can put as many of those 7 on the bottom of your library as you'd like.
You can have 7 new ones if you want.
You could have 7 new ones if you want. That would be very drastic. I think people are underutilizing their mulligan. If you are playing a starter deck, or a deck which is not optimized, a deck which has some good cards in,
Which is most casual decks.
You know what?
Most casual decks, yeah.
It's the decks I'm playing at the moment because I can't get all of the cards that I need to play the decks that I want to play.
Mm-hmm.
If you're playing that kind of suboptimal deck, then half of your hand, by definition, is probably below average in your deck. The average hand, half of those cards will be below average quality in your deck. Mm-hmm. So don't hesitate to put 3 or 4 cards back and draw another 3 or 4 cards. And I think people are really nervous to do that. They'll put 1 or 2 back. Oh, those are 7 cost uninkable cards. Like, I'm not going to be able to do that. Mm-hmm. I'll put that on the bottom and then shuffle it back in and see whether it turns up later. But right now, I can't have that in my hand. But very few people are doing that. Great. There's 4 cards I'm putting back.
Be radical in your mulligans. So what's a quick way to assess whether a card should stay in your hand or not when you're just starting out in the game? Because how do you know what's a good card and what's
So
not
I
a
already
good
talked
card?
about looking at your curve. So what are you playing on turn 1? What are you playing on turn 2? Have you got a game plan in your hand?
Yeah.
That's probably the most important thing.
Okay.
Even if it's not the
absolute best,
the
turn
absolute
one card.
optimal play, are you going to be able to make an impact on the game for the first 4 turns from your hand?
Yep.
Is really important to have a think about. But yeah, the other thing I would say is that on average, these cards are there better cards in your deck.
But
if there's
yeah.
just filler cards, because I haven't opened those packs yet, I haven't got to those cards yet, or I'm playing. A lot of us are playing with starter decks because that's something that everybody has. Everybody has a starter deck. Then everybody can play a similar power level together. So if you're in a starter deck tournament or you're in a starter deck challenge, there are cards that you never want to see. There are cards that you're like, oh, that's not the best card here. Just put them on the bottom. That's fine. And do that radically. Do that confidently. Know that even if the cards that you draw aren't better than those, the likelihood is, on average, those cards will be better.
So, yeah, that's helpful. Well, if it's like literally someone's first really early games, then they don't really know like which cards are better or not in a deck. Simple tip that I use when I would first see the starter decks is understanding the rarity of the card. So if a card has the little silver grey coloured disc at the bottom, that means it's a common.
Yep.
So it's highly likely to be less powerful than cards that have a different symbol. That other symbols are likely to be better cards. So if you really like, I have no idea, and you've got your turn 1 and 2 and 3 play, and your other cards are commons, you might as well put them at the bottom and see what else you get, because you'll probably get something better.
Yeah, also, if it's your first game, you're probably not expecting to win anyway. Just have a look at more cards. Looking at cards is nice.
Just mulligan all 7.
Maybe not the best tactical advice. Yeah, I think more people, just from playing, the people that I'm playing with currently, and that kind of early tentative steps of a game, people aren't mulliganing enough cards, or people aren't mulligan the number of cards that I think would that they should.
And you kind of alluded to it earlier, but mulligan your uninkables as well, unless it's like something that you're like, I want. Like my mother's knows best. That's uninkable, but it's in my opening hand. I'm keeping that because that could be a card that wins me the game.
But also, you play that. But you can play that on turn 3.
Yeah,
that's fine.
But,
Okay.
Yeah, that's it.
Brilliant. So those are the 10 tips we had for you.
Should we run through them really quickly? Should we go through them? So my first one was build around your passion. What was your first one, Simeon?
My first one was remember how you win the game. Focus on your lore.
My second one was make your deck as consistent as possible. Ideally, put 4 of each card in the deck.
My second one was thinking about the ink curve. So what do you want to play on each turn of the ideal game?
My third tip was put in cards that draw you other cards. Put in card draw.
I said about being aware of cognitive biases and don't just do the things that feel good. Actually think about, are they the things that are going to win you the game?
My fourth tip was you don't have to ink every turn. And once you've got 5 ink count, it's probably better not to in most situations.
My tip was to think about what the strategy of your deck is and follow that. Don't get distracted.
And my final tip was to engage with what other people are doing around the game. Talk to your friends, read content online, listen to this podcast.
And my final tip is if you have any questions that you would like to send us.
That wasn't your final tip. That wasn't.
Oh, did you get a bonus tip? Here we are. The 11th tip. Sorry, my final tip was mulligans, but the 11th tip is ask us questions. We'd love to answer your strategy questions as well. We're playing a lot of Lorcana, but David and I have also played a lot of different card games in a lot of different settings and board games and spent far too much time thinking about this stuff. There's also a list of like 8 other tips that we thought, you know what, we'll save that for a different thing, different episode, or they didn't really fit with what we were talking about. So we'll probably do this again sometime. We want to do a whole episode on card advantage and card draw at some time, so we'll definitely touch on that more in the future. Probably a good few episodes down the line, though, because, this kind of episode, it can be a bit heavy. I get it.
And where can people leave us a review, Simeon, if they want to review this podcast?
Oh, yeah. You can click all of the buttons in whatever app you're at, apart from the unsubscribe one. That's the bad one. All of the other buttons you can click. You can leave us a review on Spotify or on Apple Podcasts. You can also send us questions to either at Lorcana Podcast on TikTok or X, Twitter. And also you can email us at lorcanapodcast
at gmail.com.
At gmail.com. Oh my goodness, I just blanked then. And if you want to support us, we don't want your money right now, but we do want to grow this podcast. So please do share the podcast with your friends, share it on social media, let other people know about what we're doing here. We'd love to have more listeners on board.
Mm-hmm. And if you want to be really efficient with how you do your things, leave us a question in a review.
There you go. There's optimizing right down to the last minute of the podcast.
Have a great week, everybody.
All right, bye.